Hello! Welcome back to Aetheral Space 4.14. That's the highest my voice goes, so I hope you enjoyed it.
What is up, Shrigma males?
Whoa!
We're back here with another Aetheral Space chapter. That's right. Do you like
thought I was
Dragon,
alone.
Adrian? What?
I thought I was alone.
You thought you were the only Shrigma male? Everyone that reads Aetheral Space is one.
Yeah. If you read Aetheral Space and especially the review, hey, you just went up 10 male tiers.
Male! Can someone make a male tier list, actually, and then place all the fucking SCP characters on it, regardless of if they're male or not? Oh god, a Delta male?
Oh my god.
By the way, what is
male.
the C? Like,
for.
we know Alpha, Beta, and Delta, but what's C? Charlie, right?
Cordyceps.
Cordyceps. Oh, for Shrigma.
What? No,
Right,
code for
I get it.
cordyceps.
What do you think a cordyceps is, sweetie?
I don't know. Why don't you ask what's inside your brain?
Alright, well that would be Google, and it's a type of mushroom if I recall
No, I'm
correctly.
implying that your brain is infected by cordyceps.
You're infected by cordyceps, you stupid
I know.
Shrigma. Alright,
That's why I'm
we're
going to
not
high
saying
place.
anything. This is non-content.
Yeah, this isn't even filler.
This is just brain... This is
This
brain
is
leak.
like an
Okay.
assault upon the viewer's mind.
Anyway, last time on Aetheral Space, I forgot. I don't think I forgot, but it feels like the same thing has been happening for the past, 5 chapters. You know what I mean?
It was after the North reveal. That didn't happen for 5
Right,
chapters.
North was revealed, and we know that, and now Skipper and them,
There's fucking
Bruno and
gas
them were
flooding.
like, Skipper, you gotta go get him. Oh, right, that's right, he made the gas flood. And also, Widow, killed, or didn't kill, but, basically left the twin to die and then took the other one.
Yeah.
Alright. Niles hacked up blood as she crawled out of the vent, yellow gas spilling out from behind her. She landed in the hallway with a wet thump. Wait, I just realized... The guy sent all the trainees there to, kill and prove they're a special officer, so then why did they also hire North to flood it with gas, which would kill
It's not
all their
necessarily the same objective here.
people? Really? Supremacy at war, question mark? Civil War? Niles hacked up blood as she crawled out of the vent, yellow gas spilling out from behind her. She landed in the hallway with a wet thump. She didn't have the strength left to do anything but crawl, and even what she was doing now couldn't really be called crawling. It was more dragging herself along by her stomach, like a snail. A sickly, delirious laugh pushed its way out of her throat, an afterbirth of blood and meat following it. What had happened? She didn't even understand. Somehow, Roche had lost. The person who had been with Hadrian had killed him. It had been hard to see through the walls, but it had been some kind of sneak attack, surely. Irrelevant at this point, though. And then the gas had started flooding in. How could she not ether sense North, now that I realize it?
She did sense him. It was mentioned
No,
that the person with Dragon had transparent aether, but you didn't notice.
I did. I thought she just said it was transparent cloud, like they didn't have aether.
No, she meant it literally.
Oh. She'd hoped that once she got out of the vents, she'd have escaped the gas, but that didn't seem to be the case. It flowed freely out from the vent opening, slowly filling the hallway. Before long, it would be completely impossible for anyone on the ship to breathe. In the distance, she could hear strangled screaming. The crew of the region had encountered their latest punishment as well then. Niles tried to resume her crawling, to put more distance between herself and the vent, but all she managed was a violent shudder of her body. She had to do something. She had to do something, but it was so hard to think, like the gas was inside her head too, fog choking her brain. Blood dribbled from her half-open mouth. Was she going to die here, like this, flopping on the floor like an air-drowned fish? That didn't seem fair. That didn't seem fair at all. She hadn't even done anything with her life yet. She hadn't even had the chance. Her vision, previously blurry, grew sharper for a moment, and Niles noticed a pair of boots in front of her. Someone had come. Someone had come to save her. With all the strength she could muster, Niles glanced upwards at her savior's face. For a moment, Niles thought that the person looking down at her was Daphne, the cogitant who she'd originally been aligned with, but that notion was obviously ridiculous. Daphne would never come to save her. There would be nothing in it for her. It couldn't possibly be Daphne, then, this person looking down at her with such cold eyes. As her vision grew bleary, so did her thoughts, associated between ideas becoming loose and indistinct. A sickly smile spread across Niles' face as she realized who this person must be. "Mama," she choked out. It made sense. She didn't know what time it was aboard the Regent, but if she was feeling tired, it surely must have been getting close to her bedtime. Mama had come to tuck her in and read her a story. Tales of supremacy heroes like Negan Rush or Achilles Esmeralda. That sounds like a fake name. Achilles Esmeralda.
Do you want to be a hero, you gotta have a good fake name.
Sorry. Yes, that made sense. That was clearly it. Still smiling, blood pouring from her mouth, Niles reached up with a flailing hand, grasping for her mother's faraway face. Slowly, Mama knelt down, moving her head out of the way of Niles' grasping hand. Then she reached out and plucked the glasses from Niles' face, placing the ether lens over her own eyes instead. That only made sense, though. Niles could hardly go to sleep wearing her glasses. It was only natural for Mama to take them like that. What wasn't natural was for Mama to turn around and begin walking away. Mama wouldn't do that. Everyone else would, but not her. Niles reached out for her fading figure as her vision grew dark, shadows creeping in to cover her eyes. "Mama!" she spluttered, her mouth curiously warm. "Mama!" In the end, Viv Niles died choking on her last words. "Sir!" reported one of the bridge crew, turning away from his console to salute the instructor. "One of the cutter pods is beginning the return journey. Shall we prepare to receive them?" The instructor allowed himself to smile slightly. He hadn't expected this batch of hopefuls to be up to much, but it seemed one of them had completed their mission earlier than he'd expected. Probably the Knox twins, or perhaps that Daphne girl. That would be pleasant if so. He'd hoped he wouldn't have to kill them. The instructor nodded to the white-uniformed crew member. "Make it so. We must welcome our new special officer." Dragon did his best to ignore the stinging in his eyes as he made his way down the hallway, clinging to the wall for support. He'd had no gas mask, no rebreather, so when the gas had flooded into the training room, the only thing he'd had access to was his mind, his experiences. Not long ago, he'd infused his vocal cords with Aether to increase the volume of his speed, infusing his lungs to temporarily boost their capacity followed the same principle. Still, it hadn't been easy. He only had the one gargantuan breath he'd taken in to get him back to the slipstream, and he knew that it wouldn't last for long. It had taken everything he'd had to apply the panacea to his stomach wound without crying out, without releasing that oxygen, but he'd managed it. He couldn't stop moving. If he stopped moving, he knew he wouldn't start again. Dragon did his best not to look down at the corpses as he continued his journey. The crew of the Regent had certainly had a bad day of it. They'd been shot, blown up, and now choked by poison gas. Dragon wondered how many of them were still alive. He hadn't seen anyone else in quite a while now. "You know," his younger double said, walking alongside him, hands clasped behind his back, "this isn't your greatest plan ever." "That's not helpful." "If I'm not being helpful, it's because you're not having any good ideas. Don't blame me. Seriously, though, holding your breath and walking to the exit, you don't have nearly enough air to make it there, and you know it." "Nobody asked you." The Spectre raised an eyebrow. "I have a name, remember? We decided on it last time. Dragon Hadrian." Dragon shook his head. Too confusing. "What?" The hallucination's brow creased in annoyance. "You're just gonna rename me like I'm some kind of digital pet?" Holy shit! Tan. Wait, did you actually do that, Tan? Just because it was confusing? Greatest author move of all time. I'm going to rename you now. Actually based. That's a web. This would never happen in a normal book. Only in a web serial. What? Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're the archivist now, since you're from my archive. Cute. The archivist spat in a tone that suggested it was anything but. But more importantly, how are you going to get out of this one? Keep walking. Maybe I'll find another solution along the way. A spare rebreather or something. But if I stop walking, I'll die. Dragon stumbled, nearly tripping over the corpse of an underman gripping his throat. But he kept his balance and managed to keep going. "That's it?" The archivist laughed, stepping on the underman's corpse as he followed. "That's your plan? Hope you get lucky?" "Never said there was a plan. Don't have time to come up with them. Just gotta keep moving." Dragon's head was growing light. And,
you see, if I hadn't changed his name.
Yeah. And the sardonic voice of the archivist seemed to be coming from very far away. Maybe if he just took a breath of fresh air, he'd feel better. "Hey!" the archivist barked, snapping his fingers in front of Dragon's face to jolt him back to consciousness. "Don't you dare die in my presence! Do you have any idea how much of an eyesore that would be?" There was another dragon there, buddy. "Right," Dragon nodded. "Gotta keep moving." "No!" the archivist snapped. "It's not gotta keep moving. It's I gotta come up with a plan right fucking now or I'm gonna die! You can't just expect to get lucky and... Oh. What is it?" Despite everything he'd been thinking, Dragon paused for a moment. Had he heard something? The archivist wasn't an actual individual, after all. He was just an anthropomorphized representation of one of Dragon's thought processes. Therefore, if the archivist had noticed something, it was only because Dragon had noticed something. Boots approaching from behind him, for example. Dragon whirled around, ready to fight. He wasn't going down quietly, only to be stopped as a metallic hand firmly planted a rebreather down on his mouth. Sweet, sweet fresh air flooded into Dragon's mouth as he opened it in surprise, and the fog that had been enveloping his thoughts began to clear. Skipper grinned down at him, his own face bare. "I gotcha, kiddo," he panted. "I gotcha." The archivist chuckled bitterly. "Guess you're luckier than I thought." The armored supremacy officers, the instructor's personal guard, stood at attention in 2 rows as the cutter pod floated in, ready to receive its occupant with all the honors that could be put together on such short notice. The instructor himself stood at the far end of the... Wait, how much do you want to bet that it's fucking... what's his face? The captain guy in the ship. And or Widow.
You can say.
Oh, right. You can't because you
I know.
I keep forgetting. Hands clasped behind his back as he took in the side of the cutter pod. He glanced up at his aide. "Do we have an ID on which pod made it back?" "Yes, sir," his aide replied quietly. "The Halicourt girl, Daphne Halicourt." The instructor nodded to himself. A respectable ending to this exercise. Coadjutants were always useful, and Daphne Halicourt had the proper mindset to achieve further strength. It saddened him that he'd lost hopefuls as promising as the Knox twins, but the fact that they hadn't succeeded simply meant that they hadn't been fit for the position. That was the way of the supremacy, after all. One of the engineers cried out from their console, "Pod opening!" "What are you doing?" Dragon coughed from behind his rebreather as Skipper carried him through the hallways on his back. "You haven't got a mask, idiot! Fucking idiot!" Oh, I knew Skipper gave him his mask. "I've got my own tricks, kiddo." He's gonna fucking die tragically. "I've got my own tricks, kiddo." Skipper grinned, but his expression was strained. "Constant heartbeat landmine around my mouth keeps pushing the gas away. It's a temp fix, but it's going pretty good so far." He was lying. Dragon could tell. Skipper was putting on a brave face, but there was an undeniable quivering to his legs as he carried Dragon onwards. He wasn't breathing in all the gas, to be sure, but some was still making it through his countermeasure, and it was adding up. "Put me down," mumbled Dragon, knowing full well his own legs wouldn't be able to carry him any further. "I'll walk. Don't strain yourself." Skipper chuckled. "Mr. Adrian, you're losing your touch. I almost got the concern there." Dragon smiled softly, closing his eyes. "Don't get used to it, Baka." Suddenly, Skipper stopped. It felt right. The sudden halt jerking Dragon back into consciousness. His eyes snapped open, and he cried out in annoyance as his face bumped into the back of Skipper's head. "Hey!" he yelled, sentimentality instantly forgotten. "Watch it!" Skipper didn't reply. He just stared forward, face grimmer than Dragon had ever seen it. His eyes narrowed as he growled, "Uh-oh. What are you doing here?" Blinking to clear the cobwebs in his mind, Dragon looked up to follow Skipper's gaze. At the other end of the hallway, silhouetted by the swirling yellow gas, stood an old woman with a cane. Oh no, I bet he thinks she's the one who put the poison in, but she's innocent. A rebreather lay over her mouth, and slung over her shoulder was some kind of humanoid ice sculpture. Even with everything Dragon had witnessed today, it was still a bizarre sight. "Invited, as I imagined you were. It's been a long time, Skipper," the old woman said, looking him up and down. "You've gotten tall." Skipper swallowed. "I'd appreciate it if you moved aside, yeah?" he said, voice cold. "I'm kind of in a hurry here." The woman smiled. "You despise me, don't you, boy?" Strangely enough, she sounded somewhat pleased about the fact. Dragon spoke up, voice halting. The day had taken its toll. "Who is that?" he whispered to Skipper. "Someone you know?" "She's nobody," Skipper glared. "Forget about her." The woman answered where Skipper would not. "I am called the Widow, little one." She stepped forward, cane tapping against the ground as she walked. As the gray-haired, wrinkled old woman came into proper view, Skipper took a reflexive step back. This was something Dragon had never before seen in the idiot. Actual caution. For the first time in the fight, Skipper raised his guard. "There's no reason for you to be frightened of me, boy," the widow said, frowning. Viva comrades!" She glanced towards Dragon. "You could say I taught this man everything he knows." "Ignore her, Dragon," Skipper growled, and he began moving forwards to walk past her. She made no move to stop him, simply watching sadly as he passed. "How long has it been now, boy?" That seemed to be the final straw, the final tiny cut that snapped the rope. Skipper whirled around, nearly sending Dragon flying off his back with the movement, and screamed, "Not long enough!" The smile faded from the widow's face. "You despise me so much? I saved you, boy. I gave you everything." Wait, what did you tell me? What was going on?
I was turning my headset down a little bit because I imagined.
Oh. You made me your pet, you damn witch! Skipper spat with vehemence Dragon doubted he would ever see from him again. Had me do the dirty work for your Vanablack squad while you sat back and relaxed. Real nice of you, yeah? Yeah? Dragon found himself keeping as quiet as possible as he clung to Skipper's back, as if any irritation would turn the man's anger towards him instead. It was like clinging to the edge of an active volcano. The old woman glanced away. I saved you, she repeated, quieter. When I found you, you couldn't even talk. Barely knew how to walk. I gave that back to you. This wasn't an intrusion. Dragon shouldn't have been there. Every cell in his body was screaming that at him. This was a dangerous place to be right now. You gave that back to me? Skipper chuckled, his laughter hollow. You say you saved me. There are hospitals to help people in those situations. There are solutions that don't involve carting the kid around as your own personal attack dog, yeah? Did you think of those? Course you did! Skipper interrupted, jabbing an accusing finger towards her. But that wasn't convenient for you, was it? You'd prefer... Skipper, Dragon wheezed. We need to go. That was the worst possible thing he could have done in the situation. Shut the fuck up! Skipper screamed, head whirling around to face Dragon. His pupils were dilated to pinpricks of fury, and his teeth were bared like the fangs of a wild beast. As he realized what he'd said, though, recognized the resultant terror on Dragon's face. His expression softened. Oh, kiddo, I'm sorry. I'm real sorry. Dragon mutely nodded. He'd felt death in that shout, seen it in Skipper's eyes. For a moment, just there, he'd been face to face with a lethal enemy. Skipper took a deep breath and then released it, some of the tension draining from his body. Not all of it, not even close, but enough to restore some normalcy to his tone. He's right, he said to both himself and the widow. We need to go now, right now. I'm going to turn around and leave. I see, the widow muttered. Obviously the widow is not a good person, but I do feel a little bad for her because she was clearly cared a lot more about Skipper than the other way around. Skipper's eyes flicked to regard her. I ever see you again, he promised, I'll kill you. Yeah? And with that, he turned and began leaving, pausing for only a moment at the door to the hangar. I hope he didn't lose all his breath because of that. For a second, it seemed as if he turned back around, to continue his argument or maybe even try for reconciliation. It was only a moment, though, and it passed quickly. Skipper walked through the door, Dragon on his back, and they faded into the yellow fog. The doors to the cutter pod opened, and the instructor's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates as its occupant stepped out. 50 plasma rifles, one for each supremacy soldier in attendance, raised to point at the person who'd appeared before them. The troops cast more than a few nervous glances towards the instructor, asking for permission to fire or for further orders. The instructor, for his part, stepped forward to greet their unexpected guest. His hands slid into his pockets, smoothly putting on the knuckle dusters that had gotten him to his current rank. That vessel doesn't belong to you, the instructor said, voice steady, eyes glaring. Jamie Puro only smiled slightly as he took a step out of the pod, landing on the hangar floor with a thunk. His eyes glanced around the room, taking in the layout, the troops, the weapons, the technology, before settling into the instructor. Good evening to you, he said pleasantly. I'd like to challenge you to a duel.
His duel disc comes out.
He's got the fucking Sora deck from Arc V. Flufflebear.
10-star monster, the prince.
I can't wait for the instructor to summon ancient chaos gear golem.
Time for my finest entertainment.
This is how the supremacy destroyed your planet, wasn't it, Captain? Oh, man. That was good. I hope Skipper doesn't die. I'm getting death flags from him, or at the very least, I'm about to be injured and go into a coma flags for an arc. I'm very worried. There's a lot of things going on. I'm also wondering if anyone in Aetheral Space has a good parental figure. Everyone's parents hate them. Noelle had an abusive dad. Dragon had Mr. Fix. Skipper had a fucking assassin. We don't know where Ruth's parents were, but they didn't do anything to stop her friend from burning to death. Bruto and Serena got their own thing. Is there a single good parent in Aetheral Space?
Niles presumably had a good mum. From what she said.
I guess, but we didn't really get to meet her, huh?
It was implied. Implied good parenting is the best you got.
What, you want to see good parenting? Just look at the dying girl who's hallucinating and crying while she chokes on blood. That's good parenting.
Well, her glasses are stolen.
Mama! That read like something out of like a fucking JoJo scene. It was so heartbreaking. Mama! I have to protect Mama and Papa!
Killer Queen has already touched the ether lens.
Niall Shigechi! Just leave her. She looks gross. In the vents.
Fucking Daphne throws the fucking basketball at him. We've destroyed the drama of the scene utterly.
Rosha! Can't see Roche in the room. Oh man. So what I realized is all these supremacy hopefuls got wrecked. I don't think any. Oh, the only one that we haven't. The only one that's still maybe alive is Daphne, but the fact that she hasn't shown up yet makes me think she might appear either as like an ally or I don't know what else.
I will say, if the hopefuls hadn't run into this specific situation, it was likely going to be the Knox twins.
Right. It's also sad to me that they all seemed confident that only one of them got to live. That seems so excessive and wasteful. I would have maybe given them like a harsh, like, oh, you're back to grunt status, so you gotta fucking lose a pinky Yakuza style. But like, oh, you're just dead. You simply weren't the winner.
The instructor is not the standard sort of guy for this. He's very hardline.
Yeah, also what happens if someone kill steals? Then you're not getting the strongest, you're just getting the slyest.
Well, that's a form of strength in their eyes.
I guess.
How
the fuck did someone like Samael become a special officer? How did he pass?
He got a much more less harsh teacher.
He bought the position. Anything can be bought and sold for the right oil, Dragon.
I will confirm he had the resources that he demonstrated before he became a special officer.
Okay.
He had the money before the position.
So he comes from a rich family. I hope someone in his family did something at some... how do you get the money?
This is never going to be in the story. I can tell you his backstory.
Okay, give me it.
So he found some hidden pirate treasure from one of the pirates' crews that got fucking wrecked by a certain guy back in the 18th
I assume
history,
he
and
invested it so that he can... right?
Yeah, it was like a cache of money that he found,
right.
and then he just sort of lived off that.
He didn't even invest it to make more money?
No, he's not smart enough.
So it was just a really big cache of treasure.
He was a random salvage guy. Yeah, he was a tech guy.
That's actually
when I say tech,
funny to me.
I mean like a space.
Because he kind of proves the flaw in the supremacy's theory, right? Like in theory, they give the positions to the best and strongest, but really his case is pure luck. And I think that would be the case with a lot of supremacy. And I think that starts to show the flaws. Is that really it's just about who's the luckiest, not who's actually the most meritable.
Depending on where you are in the supremacy hierarchy, strength has a variable number of quotation marks around it.
Like, if you take out the fascist element and the element of, like, killing everyone, it's theoretically just a meritocracy, but it's a fundamentally corrupted and broken meritocracy.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Joe, I'll get the... Yep. Okay. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I don't know how much of that showed on the mic, but that was my father telling me I need to go get my laundry, which I should probably leave the call to go do now.
No worries. Well, that's the end of the episode.
Yeah, there was the... Bye!
Bye!